You are listening to The Vocal Technologist. Spoken tech for your ears.
What if $44 trillion of the stock market just evaporated? Not because of a global financial crash, but simply because the very concept of a competitive business advantage ceased to exist.
Yeah, it sounds like a literal science fiction setup, but the math behind it is startlingly real.
And as your resident vocal technologist, basically your tech-savvy mate who reads the endless industry updates so you do not have to, I want to unpack this. We have a massive stack of data here on corporate budgets, startup survival rates, and enterprise software. And the mission is to look under the hood of how AI is fundamentally rewriting business moats.
Right, and the stakes really could not be higher here. I mean, that $44 trillion number is not a typo. It is the calculated endgame of a theory gaining massive traction in the financial world called the collapse of terminal value.
Okay, before we absolutely terrify everyone listening, let us translate that into plain English. Terminal value basically means the assumption that a dominant business will just keep churning out profits forever, right?
Yes, exactly. That assumption dictates how companies are valued. You know, the S&P 500 typically prices its big winners at around 20 times their free cash flow.
Right, so if they make $1 billion in cash, the market says they are worth $20 billion.
Spot on. Investors pay that massive premium because they believe that cash machine is protected by a durable, long-term moat.
Which makes sense. And a business moat used to be, say, the 3 years and $10 million it took to build a software feature. Like a castle with a 100-foot wall.
Yeah, and if you want to steal the customers, you have to spend billions of dollars and years of engineering time just to build your own wall. But AI functions like a teleporter.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it brings the cost of replicating software features down to near zero. If a competitor can clone a complex workflow or an entire software product in a matter of weeks using AI, that massive 100-foot wall just entirely evaporates.
Meaning copying is practically free.
Completely free. And if the market realizes those advantages are temporary, that 20 times multiple could easily reprice to just 5 times.
Because why on earth would you pay a 20-year premium for a business advantage that might only last 6 months?
Precisely. So if you apply a 75% haircut to the S&P 500 to account for that loss of long-term confidence, you're looking at tens of trillions of dollars vanishing.
Which is where you get $44 trillion evaporating. It sounds apocalyptic, but we have actually seen this movie before with newspapers, right?
We have, yeah.
Because they had local monopolies on attention, traded at 12 to 15 times their operating profit, and then the internet made distribution free.
And their moat vanished, dropping them to trading at 2 to 4 times profit. Same with taxi medallions in New York. They were a $1 million asset guaranteeing a monopoly until ride-sharing took the value effectively to zero.
But here is the massive contradiction we are seeing. We are watching, what, $300 to $500 billion a year being poured into AI infrastructure?
Yeah, building massive data centers, buying millions of processing chips, and training foundation models. Investors only tolerate $500 billion in capital expenditure if the resulting returns from AI are highly durable.
Wait, hang on. So we are spending $500 billion to build the very thing that destroys our own profit margins, which, yeah, is exactly as terrifying as it sounds. It is like paying an absolute premium to construct a highly efficient wrecking ball aimed directly at your own house.
That is it is a very visceral way to visualize it, but it is entirely accurate.
Yeah.
And the structural damage from that wrecking ball hitting the broader software market is already visible.
How so?
Public software companies have been printing lower growth rates every single year since their peak.
Right, but the standard excuse you hear for that is general macroeconomic tightening, or that AI is writing all the code so people do not need to buy as much software.
That is the popular narrative, sure, but the reality is much simpler. It just comes down to finite corporate budgets. Companies do not suddenly have endless piles of cash just because a new technology arrived.
Right, they just reshuffle the deck.
Exactly. What they are doing is taking an unprecedented share of their existing software budgets and redirecting it to foundation model providers like Anthropic and OpenAI.
Which is just a staggering shift.
It is massive. That new category went from 0 to over $40 billion in revenue in just 2 years. That money had to come from somewhere. It is a massive structural rebalancing.
Speaking of where the money goes, this brings up a massive irony. We sit around talking about AI moving at light speed, completely rewriting the fabric of the economy. But then you look at the case studies on enterprise software from the materials you shared with us, and it is like walking into a time capsule.
It is genuinely jarring. Look at SAP, which is the software backbone of global supply chains, warehouse logistics, and corporate finance. Upgrading from their legacy system, SAP ECC, to their newer cloud version, S/4HANA, is not just clicking an update button and waiting for a progress bar.
No, I imagine it is a bit more involved than updating your phone.
Just a bit. A typical transition for a large enterprise costs around $700 million.
Wait, 700 million?
Yes. It takes 3 full years to implement and requires an embedded team of 50 consultants from firms like Accenture just to manage the migration.
$700 million and 3 years just to upgrade your internal database software. Why is it so incredibly expensive? Surely you just, I don't know, copy the data over to the new cloud servers.
Because it is never just a database. Over decades, corporations custom-build millions of lines of code into these systems to handle highly specific local tax laws, unique warehouse logistics, bespoke payroll quirks.
Ah, so it is deeply entangled.
Exactly. Ripping out the core system means mapping and rewriting every single custom process. It is the corporate equivalent of performing open-heart surgery on a patient while they are running a marathon.
And the patient does not always survive the surgery. I mean, the European supermarket giant Lidl famously attempted this exact transition. They spent 7 years and blew $500 million on the project before completely scrapping it and reverting to their old system.
Yeah, that was a very public, very painful failure.
Lidl blew $500 million just to go back to square one, because apparently that is where we are now. It is like realizing your car engine is completely rusted, but instead of replacing it, you just hire an incredibly smart chauffeur to drive it really gently so it does not explode.
That smart chauffeur analogy perfectly describes what is happening in the market right now. Startups like Axiomatic, Conduct, and Tessera have realized that replacing these monolithic legacy systems is nearly impossible.
So they just leave the rusted engine alone.
Basically, yes. So instead of trying to rip it out, they simply wrap it in an AI layer.
How does that actually work in practice, though? Are they just putting a chatbot over the top of it?
Not exactly. They use AI agents to act as an intelligent interface. The AI agent navigates the clunky, archaic databases in the background, retrieving data and updating records, while the human worker gets a clean, modern, conversational interface.
Right, so the human never has to see the terrible old software.
Exactly. They are directly targeting the $380 billion system integration market, effectively rendering those massive consulting migrations obsolete. You do not fix the engine. You just hide it behind a brilliant chauffeur.
Okay, so at the top end of town, you have bloated, rusted enterprise engines being driven by AI. But at the exact opposite end of the spectrum, for brand new businesses, AI is moving in a completely different direction. You look at platforms like Shopify, and they're essentially reducing the marginal cost of entrepreneurship to practically zero.
Shopify is a prime example of this frictionless future. They are no longer just a storefront builder. They have unified payments, global logistics, and inventory management into one stack.
Right, they handle the entire backend.
Yeah, and now they are embedding AI directly into that infrastructure to handle the manual labor, generating product descriptions, optimizing shipping routes, managing customer service queries. It is all automated. Creating a fully functional retail company is almost entirely frictionless.
Which creates a fascinating tension for anyone building a business. Let us connect the logic here. If Shopify and AI make starting a business frictionless, and if writing perfect code is essentially free, what actually separates the winners from the losers?
That is the big question.
Yeah, because if everyone has the same zero-cost tools, how do you build a company that survives?
That is the defining question for founders right now. When building software was highly technical and difficult, engineering was the ultimate bottleneck. The status hierarchy of the tech world reflected that. The best engineers won.
Sure, because just getting the thing to work was a massive achievement.
Exactly. But when the cost of creation drops to zero, the variance in outcomes shifts entirely away from code and towards human judgment.
Judgment meaning what exactly? Are we talking about deciding what features to build?
It is deciding what to build, how to sequence those features, and crucially, how to frame the product for the market. This is why the most underrated hire any founder can make right now is a truly great product person. And the rarest talent in the market is someone who is genuinely bilingual.
Bilingual between tech and business.
Bilingual between deep technology and cultural currents. They need a deep understanding of what is technically possible with the latest AI models, but they also need a visceral understanding of human behavior.
Right, because just because you can build it does not mean anyone wants it.
Spot on. They have to know which cultural shifts represent real, lasting human desires and which are just ephemeral trends. When the code is cheap, the product is the judgment.
I want to push back on that a bit, though, because as a founder, surely you cannot do everything yourself. We are constantly told that the secret to scaling a company is to hire brilliant marketing teams, hire those bilingual product geniuses, and delegate. Why cannot a founder just step back?
Well, you absolutely have to delegate operations, code, and sales execution. But there's one thing a founder can never delegate, and that is storytelling. Storytelling is not just clever marketing copy. Storytelling is the core strategy of the company.
Unpack that for me. Why is it fatal to hand off the story?
Because the founder is the only person in the entire organization who holds the full, unvarnished context. They know exactly why the company was started. They remember every single failed experiment from the early days, what those painful failures taught them, and the ultimate destination they are trying to reach.
Right, they have the scar tissue.
Exactly. When you hand that over to a marketing director who joined 6 months ago, they have to fill in the gaps with their best guesses.
It is like a corporate game of telephone. The vision gets slightly diluted with every new hire.
Exactly. It creates a subtle misalignment that compounds across every single function of the business. Eventually, your sales team is closing customers on a story that is slightly wrong, while your product team is building features toward a vision that is slightly off. You end up with a fundamentally fractured company.
That makes total sense. If your sales team tells the wrong story, you attract the wrong customer, which inevitably leads to them leaving.
Right.
But even if you get the story perfectly right, keeping the customer is an entirely different battle. The notes you shared with us about retention flip conventional wisdom completely upside down.
Yeah, retention is arguably the hardest part of running a modern software business. And the biggest misconception founders have is that retention is purely a product value problem. The reality is that retention is a perception problem.
A perception problem, meaning what?
Customers rarely churn because a product stopped delivering value. They churn because they stopped noticing the value.
Right, because human beings adapt incredibly fast. What feels like a miraculous time saver in month 1 just becomes the boring baseline expectation by month 3.
Which is why you have to cement their before state on day 1. You
Right.
actively document how slow, expensive, or painful their process was before they started using your tool. You create a visible, permanent benchmark.
So you're constantly reminding them of how bad they had it.
Exactly. That way, every time your software delivers an outcome, it is explicitly measured against that original pain point. You force them to notice the win.
Are there any companies actually doing this well? Because most business software is incredibly dry.
Look at a company called Rilla. They went from 0 to $70 million in annual recurring revenue, or ARR, in just 7 years. That makes them the 7th fastest growing software as a service company in the world.
Wow.
And their entire growth engine is built on tactics that most business software companies completely ignore. They use streaks, daily goals, and highly visual progress tracking.
Wait, how do you make heavy corporate software engaging? Are we talking about adding video game mechanics to supply chain databases, like a language learning streak app, but for corporate enterprise software?
Yes, they apply the exact same mechanics you see in consumer habit apps directly into heavy business software.
That is brilliant, but mildly dystopian. It proves that the person buying and using the enterprise software is still just a human being who gets a massive dopamine hit from seeing a number go up.
Precisely. We often forget that business-to-business software is still just business to human. And speaking of human psychology, there is a massive internal threat growing inside modern companies revolving entirely around how we spend other people's time.
Think about your own day. How many times does a coworker message you asking for a file or a quick update? It takes them 2 seconds to ask, but it completely ruins your flow for 20 minutes.
Right. We are facing a crisis of asymmetric communication. Asking a colleague for something is virtually frictionless and free for the person asking, but it's enormously expensive for the person receiving the request.
Because you have to stop what you are doing.
Exactly. Their deep work is shattered. They have to expend significant cognitive energy to rebuild whatever mental state they were in before the interruption.
And AI is just pouring gasoline on this problem, is it not?
It is compounding it exponentially. You do not even have to spend the 10 seconds typing the question anymore. You can have an AI agent analyze a document, generate 20 questions, and fire them off to 5 different colleagues instantly.
Oh, there's brutal.
People are effectively shifting the burden of their own productivity onto the shoulders of their coworkers. The friction of communication used to be the natural filter that stopped us from bothering each other with trivial things. Now the filter is gone.
And the legal liability of that is terrifying. If your employees are deploying personal AI agents to do their busy work, who is actually on the hook when those agents make a mistake?
The organization bears the risk. We are seeing a major shift where legal liability falls directly on the company for the actions of their employees' personal AI agents.
So if my AI messes up, the company gets sued.
Basically, yeah. If your agent hallucinated a detail in a contract or accidentally shared proprietary code while trying to summarize a project, the company is responsible. It forces organizations to actively put friction back into the right places to protect deep attention and secure their data.
So let us look at the full picture of what founders are dealing with right now. You have collapsing market values, destroying your valuation, $50 million software traps, the burden of flawless storytelling, figuring out how to gamify your product so people actually notice it, and stopping your own employees' AI agents from legally compromising the business. The mental friction of just holding all these shifting variables together sounds exhausting.
The friction is very real, and the carded data you provided proves exactly how heavy that toll is. They analyzed data across 18,920 startups in the United States.
That is a massive sample size.
It is, and they found that 25 to 28% of all two-founder startups lose a co-founder by year 4.
Over a quarter of founding teams fracture before they even reach the 5-year mark. Why? Is it just the sheer weight of making all these judgment calls?
It is a combination of decision fatigue and the intense psychological load. The technical challenges of building a product have largely been solved by AI, but the strategic and human challenges have multiplied.
Because the goalposts keep moving.
Yes, and when the rules of survival change this rapidly, differing risk tolerances and misaligned visions tear teams apart, the bottleneck stops being the code and starts being the human capacity to manage relentless adaptation.
Which brings us full circle. We started by unpacking a hypothetical $44 trillion collapse of competitive moats, and we have wound our way through the very real ways that technology is tearing down the old walls of business. From the enterprise nightmares of legacy software, to the frictionless reality of modern startups, to the deep psychological importance of storytelling and attention.
It is a lot to take in.
It really is. So I want to leave you with a thought to mull over as you look at your own work. If AI is genuinely making every single competitive advantage temporary and bringing the literal cost of building a product down to zero, is your current career or your business model based on being genuinely unique? Or have you just been relying on being mildly hard to copy? Exploring these uncomfortable questions is exactly what we do here as your vocal technologist. Keep questioning the defaults.
Spoken Tech for your ears.